Hey everybody, it's GauntletX and welcome back to some more Magic Arena. Today I'll be playing another Premier Draft of Dominaria United Alchemy. This is essentially a normal Premier Draft of Dominaria, except there is one Alchemy card in each pack, and our Alchemy card in this pack is quite strong. We actually have 3 bombs, I would say. In black, we have the nice 4/4 Menace that gives an additional card +1/+1 and Menace whenever you cast a black permanent spell. We have Tachiova, which can end the game late game when you're playing extra lands. They're coming into play as 3/3 flyers, and Vidalian Tidemage is the new Alchemy card here. 3 mana 3/3, whenever one or more other non-token creatures you control are dealing combat damage to a player, you're getting to conjure a duplicate of that creature into your hand. So all 3 of these are very powerful, very solid ways to go. I think Tachiova's maybe the #1 strongest, but Vidalian Tidemage is really close, and I've never played with this card before in my own deck, so I'm actually not sure. It might just be stronger. I am going to start with the Tidemage and see how it plays for us, but you really only need 1 or 2 triggers off of this for this to be a ridiculous amount of card advantage here, being able to conjure up your best creatures that you're hitting your opponent with. Seems like it'll play really well with combat tricks, and this format has some very powerful ones. For pick 2, we have a Joda's Codex if we want to head down the domain direction. We have a Diminished Returner if I just want to keep taking more Alchemy cards, but this would be pretty hard to play in a deck that also has green-blue, because it is a double black card. Got a Shore Up for a combat trick to work with the Tidemage. Honestly, this pack is not very exciting for me personally. Not a huge fan of Garnus, that's not a huge direction to try to go. It's really just like Diminished Returner, Shore Up, or Codex, I guess. Not a super powerful pack here. Flowstone Infusion's also fine, but definitely not any of these. None of these are like great follow-ups to the Tidemage. I guess Shore Up makes the most sense. I'm not very happy about pick 2ing a Shore Up, although all I'm really passing up on is the Joda's Codex, and I'm not a massive fan of the very slow 5-color domain decks that like to run the Codex. I think they are very powerful, and Codex can be a great addition to those decks. I just don't have a ton of fun playing that kind of strategy. So here we are in pick 3 now. We do have a Djinn of the Fountain, which is a ton of mana, but it is a big creature to try to duplicate off the Vidalian Tidemage. It's played a little too slow for my tastes in the format. Bog Badger's pretty solid. A 3 mana 3/3 is just a good rate, and if you ever kick this, sometimes it can end the game. We've also got a Contaminated Aquifer to help splash black if we want to do that, or a Tribute to Urborg, which would be a reason for us to try to splash black, because it's a very good, very efficient removal spell. I think Tribute to the Urborg is where I want to be here. Our Alchemy card for this pack, not particularly playable. It's just going to give you an extra copy of one of your instants or sorceries. Those kind of effects have rarely been that good in Limited. So now that we took this Tribute to Urborg, we're pretty happy to take this Knight of Dusk's Shadow as one of the strongest cards in the pack, heading into black as a primary color now. A 2 mana 2/2 with Menace that can get +1/+1 for only 2 mana, making this very hard to block profitably or well at all. So we'll take a Knight of Dusk's Shadow. Other really nice cards in the pack are Contaminated Aquifer to help with the mana if we do want to do blue, black, and green. There's Take Out the Shield being a really good combat trick in white, and Bite Down being green's pretty much only removal spell at common, as far as I know. So those are the other solid cards here. Everything else is like fine. Shield Wall, Kavu, Acolyte's a bit slow, but fine. Pretty easy Knight of Dusk's Shadow there. And I guess we're just going to start like kind of blue-black control here. We have a really nice Essence Scatter that we can pick up. Counter spells tend to play really well in this format. There's just tons of creatures with very good enter the battlefield effects, and a lot of big late-game creatures that it's nice to be able to counter for only 2 mana. So I'm a huge fan of Essence Scatter, and I'm happy to take it here. Pack 1, pick 6. Our Alchemy card is Trove Mage, which we need to run a lot of artifacts for this consistently trigger. Ideally at least 3, because by the time we cast this, our deck is probably down to 30 cards, since it's a 40-card deck format. So on average, to have 1 out of every 10 cards be an artifact, there need to be 3 left in the deck. I guess we need 4 artifacts for 1 out of 10, because who's to say we wouldn't have just drawn an artifact before we played this. But yeah, not a lot of decks in this format end up with 4 more artifacts. That's not the greatest thing ever. Magdaros Sentry's fine. Nice big blocker. I'm not a huge fan of Atrocity, Sea Scavenger, Founding the Third Path. Atrocity is good, but it requires that red kicker to be great. Very happy to see a pick 7 Tolarian Terror here. This works really well in the blue-black deck. Blue decks just tend to run a ton of instants and sorceries, and black decks can have a little bit of self-mill. So when you add those two things together, you can cast some very cheap Tolarian Terrors. Incredibly happy to take that. There's also Sunbathing Root Wall if we wanted to go really domainy here. And Protect the Negotiators if we go down the white path, but that seems unlikely right now. Shield Wall Sentinels everywhere for whoever opens the Wingmantle Chaplain. I guess we get a Sea Scavenger now, or I could take a Domain Land. Sea Scavenger's pretty filler in any deck it ends up in. Librarian is basically Sea Scavenger for any deck, but slightly weaker. Much easier to cast, though, because it fits in literally anything. I mean, these both are pretty filler. We can speculate a little on a Domain Land here. Now there's a Bite Down, and that is about it. And green is our least represented color right now, I think. I guess it's tied with black. We have 2 green cards, 2 black cards. However, we have 4 blue. So we're definitely blue. I think I can go Monstrous Warleech here. That works really well with Tolarian Terror, because Tolarian Terror is a 7-mana card to throw into the graveyard for the Warleech to be a 7/7, and the Warleech mills ourselves, so it can also help reduce the cost of the Tolarian Terror. Codex if we want to go for the super slow domain deck. Other than that, there's a Shield Wall Sentinel to speculate on. I'm actively avoiding ever drafting Defenders again because it's just not fun for myself or my opponent. So that's just not an option, and Barkweave Crusher doesn't really do anything, so we'll take a Codex. Unlikely to make the cut, but maybe we really get pushed into that direction and that ends up happening. I prefer not. Warhorse is a card I'm not very happy to play unless I can kick it with white, which looks very unlikely right now, so we'll just take a random green creature just in case we end up blue-black or blue-green with black as the splash. Academy Wall can be okay, even if you're not a Defender's deck. If you just have a really high instant sorcery count, can help draw cards, discard, fill the grave. Tablet's like a last resort for mana fixing. Sea Scavenger's good here. We're not going to be kicking any strengths of the Coalition. All right, Karn is the rare of the pack. It's a pretty cool card. It is actually powerful and limited because this limited format is slow and grindy enough, especially if you build around it, to where you can have a cluttered up board state where it's hard for your opponent to attack into the Karn, which will allow you to have several turns of either using Karn's plus ability a couple turns, then getting to that ultimate, which is a game-winning ultimate. If you plus Karn 3 times and then use the ultimate, you get to deal 3 damage, divided as you choose among any targets every turn, which is pretty busted. Or you can -1 card and keep drawing cards based on how much mana you dump into it. So you dump 3 mana into it, draw 1 card out of the top 3. So Karn is actually good if you can clutter up the board state and have Karn sitting behind some blockers. Karn will give you an inevitable way to end the game. That being said, Cut Down is excellent, very efficient removal, but I've never actually shown off Karn, so I'm going to take the Karn here. Our Alchemy card there was also playable, but not like by a lot. It was a 2-mana 3/2 reach, and we mill a random land from our deck every turn. So the idea behind that card is to make sure we don't flood out late game. So it's cool. It's just not particularly wild or anything. Not as wild as a Karn. So for Pack 2, Pick 2, we don't really have anything great for blue or black. We have a Battlefly Storm if I want to sit here blocking, or a Timely Interference to help fill our grave with more instants for our Tolarian Terror. I can take a Molten Tributary speculating towards Domain. Our Alchemy card is an aggressive red card, which doesn't really work in our deck. This pack just seems like a bit of a wash for us, although we are getting a little more into green, so maybe I just take one of these random green dorks. I don't know, I think I'm just going to take the Timely, just another cantrip, another just 1-mana draw card to fill our grave for our Tolarian Terror. Here we go, this is the kind of pack we were looking for. Now we have a Tangled Islet, another Tribute to Urborg for more removal, another Monstrous Warleech, which might wheel, and a Frostfist Strider for a very efficient creature. 5 mana for a 4/4 Ward 2 and lock down an opponent's creature for a turn, stun it. Super, super nice, but I think I just need to take another removal spell here, seeing as I only have 1. I have 1 removal spell and 1 counter spell. Feels like as good a spot as any for our second copy of Tribute to Urborg. Our instant and sorcery count is also not looking great right now, so we want to up that. We have 4 instants, and that's it. So 5th instant into the deck. Join us. Very nice Urg spawn of Turg here. It's probably the pick. I am passing up on Tolarian Terror, which is pretty sad. And then Eerie Soul Tender, which is a little sad. Soul Tender is doing what we want to do. We are going to be self-milling a bit with our Monstrous Warleech and our Tolarian Terror. But Urg is a very, very good way to self-mill. A 3-mana 0/5, but it gets an additional power for each land in your graveyard. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you can look at the top card of your library. If you don't want it, you can put it into your graveyard. So Urg is going to slowly get bigger and bigger as you are milling lands, and Urg is going to set up your draws and make sure you're drawing what you need to. Urg is fantastic with some graveyard synergies. We do have a little bit of those, so I'm going to take Urg there over Tolarian Terror, but I think Tolarian Terror would be a reasonable choice. We now have a second copy of Essence Scatter or a first copy of Impulse. I think I'd rather take my first copy of Impulse here, but a second Essence Scatter would be good too. I just really like being able to hold up an Essence Scatter or a Tribute to Urborgai's removal and have a backup plan of if we don't need to interact with what our opponent's playing, then instead we still have something to do with our mana. We haven't just skipped a turn with that mana. We're still at least drawing a card off Impulse instead. Plus, this is a great card selection card. Picking your best card out of the top 4 can often get you the kind of card you're looking for, whatever type that is. We are looking pretty controlling right now. We're moving towards this kind of blue-black at the core with a green splash sort of late-game control deck. So I think Choking Miasma does fit decently well in here. It's a little coin flippy, which is an issue, but if we're ever against red-white or really just any white aggressive deck, this is going to be a huge gain for us. Actually, Terra Sunder... Yeah, Terra Sunder is good against literally everything because it's 4 mana instant speed, exile, and on-land permanent. I would have loved to have a Choking Miasma in here, though, because it helps our matchup against aggressive white decks a lot. The biggest problem with the Choking Miasma is there are some matchups, such as just against domain strategies, where it does pretty much nothing, and drawing a card throughout the game that just does nothing can often cost you the game, because then you've essentially started mulligans down to 6 by default, which is pretty bad. I'm going to take another Impulse there. Vineshaper Prodigy was another option, but I have a lot of instants in here, so I'd prefer to grab more instant speed ways to try to draw cards than creatures that help with that. I love Sprouting Goblin, but we do not have the red sources for it. We can take another Magnagoth Sentry or Pixie Illusionist to help our mana. Hopefully the green splash isn't that difficult. I'm going to take another Magnagoth Sentry. Pixie Illusionist is another card. I like to treat it as sort of a last resort kind of splash card. We've got a Vineshaper Prodigy that Vine Soul Spider did wheel, so that's kind of cool. Or a Gaia's Might that can help us make some more risky attacks with our Vidalian Tide Mage stuff going on, but other than that, our deck doesn't look like a great spot for combat tricks, so I'm going to take the Vineshaper Prodigy. A lot of green cards here is a little awkward. We could take a Tributary, which helps with Domain, but I don't really care about Domain. I think I would rather just take a Mana Worker here, or just another Bog Badger. I'm just going to take a Mana Worker. If we need one of these last resort kind of fixers, I'm just going to rare draft this Miria. Yep, that'll complete my playset. If you ever need to see how many of each card you own, if you're trying to rare draft yourself, just hold down the Alt key if you are on PC and whatever the equivalent is on Mac. Alright, I guess it's a Haunting Figment. And it looks like we pretty much have a deck. We have 22 non-land cards, so we need one more. But basically every pick in our last pack is going to be designed around making this deck better. Well, that would be the ideal. Now we're going to actually have to jump ship and kind of swap deck strategies, because if we open the strongest green card in the entire set, we are going to draft that, and green is going to become a main color of the deck. So instead of blue-black splash green, looks like we're swapping into blue-green splash black. So we want to take the Defiler here. We'd ideally not play the Knight, because that's a 2-drop black card. And then Urg is double black, which can be difficult. Warleech, maybe not. Now we're becoming like blue-green at the core, potentially. Maybe we cut Urg too. Run as many green permanents as possible. I don't believe I cut any green permanents. Yeah, we'll see. We're definitely taking Defiler there. Yeah, we have a reasonable pivot to just blue-green as the core. And even maybe just splashing 2 Tribute to Urborgs and it's still, we only need 4 more cards to finish off this deck. That could be reasonable. Could be perfectly reasonable. Alright, let's see what this Alchemy rare is. Skyrider Jin. 4 mana for a 3/4 flyer. Okay, I'm taking it. When it enters the battlefield, conjure a random card from its spellbook into your hand. Then if you have fewer cards in hand than the number of basics among lands you control, repeat this process. So if you dump this card on the board and you have an empty hand, and you have 3 land types, you draw 3 cards out of its spellbook, that's incredible, even if the cards in its spellbook suck. Which, okay, they kind of do. They're pretty narrow cards, but it's going to give you some value. A 4 mana 3/4 flyer draw card is already great, and almost everything in the spellbook looks like it draws a card. So 4 mana 3/4 flyer draw card. If our hand's a little low, seems excellent. I would love a Mossbeard Ancient as a big late game finisher. Sure, I'll take that thing. That seems fun. There's also a Sunbathing Root Walla, which gives us a 2-drop creature, which might be necessary. I should sort my instants and sorceries out so I can see where my creatures are landing on the curve. Only really have 1 2-mana creature right now, but I'm still not going to take 1 over Mossbeard Ancient because that card is just bonkers. Another Tolarian Terror seems easier to cast for our deck than Sojourner because look at this instant sorcery pile. Looks pretty great to me. Other things in the pack, I guess there's Derrygaz as well if we want to take Alchemy. But not being super splashy today. We're going to stick to blue-green. Not going to play like every color. Cut Down could be a decent splash. Trove Mage is not good. We don't have any artifacts. Phasing of Zalfir is just not a great card, period. Cut Down's really the only thing we'd end up playing. I'm not going to put a Hexbane Tortoise in here. It's incredibly filler. We could maybe splash in a Cut Down. Definitely going to throw in a Sunbathing Root Walla. This helps with our lack of 2-mana creatures. So we have more things to get on the board to trade off with opposing aggressive cards. Take another Bog Badger here or an Automatic Librarian. I think I prefer the Bog Badger. That extra point of toughness is actually incredibly important. Being able to block 2-mana 2/2s and 2/1s and stuff from your opponent without dying. So you can actually keep something on board to keep your opponent from attacking you. Wandering Treefolk's an incredible card. I'm surprised it is still in here, but we are going to slam dunk this thing. This is a 2-mana 2/3 with Vigilance. For 8 mana, you seek a creature card, which is to choose a creature at random from your deck and put it into your hand. So basically draw a random creature. And this ability costs 1 less for each land type among lands you control. So in our deck, domain 3. So a green and 4, so 5 mana to just draw a creature. A really good mana sink ability. So if you ever get into a board stall and each player's just staring at each other, you just inevitably will win that game because you'll draw so many more cards than your opponent. I don't want this returner. I think I'm going to take Deathbloom Gardener here. Hope with that black splash. Not the most exciting thing ever, but it's fine. Joint Exploration's fine. Tortoise is bad. Turtle is bad. Sadly, the turtles in this set are bad. Sojourner is cost reduced by 3, so it's 5 mana for a 4/6. It's not great, but I don't think I'm playing Combat Tricks. I'll just throw that in the side for now. I don't know if that makes the cut. Take a Trove Mage for the collection at this point. Alright. We've got a lot of bomb power in this deck. We even have the 1-2 punch of Vidalian Tide Mage and Defiler Vigor, which is ridiculous if it goes off. Because the Tide Mage conjures a duplicate of one of our attacking creatures when we deal combat damage to our opponent. So if our Defiler Vigor ever attacks, because of its trample, it's incredibly likely to deal damage to our opponent, which means we just get a second Defiler Vigor if we have the Tide Mage on board, which is completely absurd. So our mana's pretty bad here. We probably have to play Mana Worker and Deathbloom Gardener because I did not manage to get any blue-black or blue-green duels. We saw a lot of them like pack 1 and at the start of pack 2, but I didn't see a lot of great opportunities there in the very end in pack 3. So should have taken those lands more aggressively earlier in the draft, and that will cost us a bit here. If we had all those contaminated aquifers that we were seeing and tainted isles and stuff like that, that would make the black splash easy enough that maybe we could even fit Urg into here. But without, it's going to be a pretty difficult one. Luckily, all of our black cards only require a single black mana, and they're removal spells, meaning we can wait till quite a bit later in the game, and they'll still be relevant. So we have 45 cards here. We're going to cut 5 of them. We're definitely playing at least 17 lands. A lot of good 4-mana cards. We always want to hit turn 4. Great 5-drop, and the biggest reason to definitely not cut down to 16 lands is we have a great 7-drop as well. Terror is going to be a bit cheaper, somewhere in the 4 or 5 mana range most likely. So I don't think I'm going to cut any instants or sorceries. I think all of our instants and sorceries are pretty good. And I like that count high with double Tolarian Terror. So let's find our 5 weakest creatures. Vineshaper Prodigy, basically a 4-drop, so we've got a lot at 4 mana. Haunting Figment's a really weak 2-drop. We'll be down to just 3 of them, but they're 3 really good ones. Sunbathing Rootwalla, Wandering Treefolk, and the Salvaged Mana Worker. Again, Mana Worker, usually pretty filler, not the greatest thing ever, but when you have 0 dual lands, Mana Worker actually I think seems pretty good in this deck. Looking at our 3-drops, Academy Wall, not in love with it. I mean, it does do the thing where as we're casting instant sorceries, we're drawing, discarding a card, filling our graveyard with some more of them for the Tolarian Terrors, but I just don't think that's all that necessary. I'd rather have creatures that are operating well on the offensive and the defensive. You know, creatures that can attack or block. Yeah, I like all of our other 3-drops more than that, I think. Looking at 4 mana, I kind of want to cut Vineshaper Prodigy. That feels wrong, because it's such a great just little value play. But I think we have a lot of good value plays, like Tide Mage potentially drawing us creatures, Wandering Treefolk drawing us creatures when we dump mana into it, Karn can draw us cards multiple turns in a row, Impulse is digging for a good card. I don't know, let's cut these for sure, and then we still cut 3 more. Timely Interference is kind of just in here to help with Tolarian Terrors. Might not be the greatest thing ever, and Cut Down out of all of our removal spells is the one that gets the worst later in the game, because we can kick these tributes. Karn is a moderately hard sell, because there's one of those things about Karn that I don't like in my cards. I prefer everything I run to be good when I'm on the offensive and I have like the lead in the board state, when the board state's at parity, when we're tied, or when I'm behind on board. And Karn is horrible when we're behind on board. Like if we don't have blockers, or our opponent has bigger creatures, Karn just doesn't impact the game immediately at all. Like we play Karn, we make a tapped Power Stone and pass, and then if they have better attackers than us, they're just going to kill Karn. Like it takes Karn several turns to make a decent impact on the game, so you really need to be, the board state needs to be locked. Your opponent needs to be like unable to touch Karn. But Karn does pretty much guaranteed win those games when the board state is like that. That's why it's like, yeah, when the board state's like that, you're like, oh, this card is incredible. I'm going to draft this every time. I'm going to play it every time. But you need to account for the games where it's not like that, where I draw Salvage Mana Worker into Sea Scavenger, and my opponent curved out with a 2-mana 3/1, and then the Argivian Cavalier, a 2/2 and a 1/1, right? The 3/1 attacks into Mana Worker all day. The 2/2 and 1/1 attack into the Scavenger. And then my turn 4 play in hand is Karn, and it's like, I can't do anything with this, because if I put it out, my opponent easily attacks through my board state, and it's not going to affect the game at all for multiple turns. So I know I said I hadn't played the Karn before, so I kind of wanted to show it off. I think I have another, like a good amount of other really powerful cards to show off here to play around with. Sea Scavenger is my only 2 toughness 3-mana card, and that is another thing I'm not a huge fan of. That's a pretty big detriment to the card, having that low of toughness. Trading down into most 2-mana creatures when it's a 3-mana creature. Could cut that one. Especially when it doesn't actually draw us a card when we play it. It just lets us set up our next draw. It just lets us scry. That's why Vineshaper is better than Scavenger, even though it has the same problem. It's a 4-mana creature that's a 2/2. But with this one, you're full on drawing the best card out of your top 3, which means it's immediately replacing itself with another card in your hand. And then even if it just chump blocks, like, you're not that unhappy. These feel like the 3 cards I'm supposed to cut, but I'll stick to what I said, and I'll actually play the Karn. I'm going to cut a Sea Scavenger. I'm going to put the Karn back in, and I'm going to cut probably one of the 4-drops, maybe one of the Sentries, although Vine Shaper Prodigy would make sense as well, because the small blocking body. If we are going to run Karn, we want to run as many just chunky blockers as possible, like 5/5s, 4/4s, 3/4s, so you know what, sure, I'll cut Vine Shaper Prodigy and leave Karn. Karn will be our card draw engine there. And then we cut the Timely that we set aside. And this is the deck. We're going to try the Karn out. Hopefully we get into the board states where our opponent can't attack in, because we do have a lot of big chunky creatures. And if we are in those board states, Karn's going to be good. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes here. Let's make sure the mana is solid. We have 11 green cards, 8 black. I'm sorry, 11 green, 8 blue, and 3 black. Don't have any double green until 5, so 7 green sources. It's a little bit less than 1 out of 5. It's a little sketchy. Blue, I'm pretty okay with that. All of our blue cards are a single blue, and most of them can wait. Like, our first blue card is 3 mana if you don't cast the instance, which can always wait till later in the game. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely fine with 6 blue. I'm not so sure that I'm fine with 7 green. But then dropping down to just 3 swamps is going to make the black splash pretty rough. Because then we have Cut Down, W Tribute to Urborg, and Terra Sunder. All of these need a black mana to function. I guess if our opponent plays a really good artifact or enchantment, that we don't need the black mana for Terra Sunder, but that is not going to be a frequent occurrence to justify the inclusion if we can't consistently hit black. But I do think an 8th green is going to be better for the deck, more important than a 4th black. And luckily we do have Mana Worker and Deathbloom Gardener to help with both of those problems whenever we draw them. So we'll see. Mana could be an issue here for sure. Definitely did not take any dual lands that actually help us here, which was a bit awkward, but this will be the deck. Alright, here we are with the final build of today's deck. This is going to be a blue-green deck, splashing a little bit of black for some good removal. All 4 of our removal spells are off of the black splash. The core of the deck, the blue-green deck here, was mainly because we got a Defiler Vigor nice and late that we tried to pivot into. We also got this Vidalian Tide Mage early on, that if we can hit our opponent with our creatures, we get to start putting duplicates of them in our hand, which is a really ridiculous card draw engine. So that should be really good. Wandering Treefolk, another great mana sink as a card draw engine there. So a lot of ways to get a ton of value late in the game and try to outvalue our opponents. Our Skyrider Djinn, another one of our alchemy cards, is a very good one. If our hand is empty and we have all 3 of our land types on the board, this is going to draw us 3 cards from its spellbook when it comes into play. Now, those cards aren't the greatest things ever, but they're all non-lands at the very least, and the majority of them draw a card when we cast them. So we get a different card out of the deck, minimum. So pretty nice stuff there from the rares for sure. We also have one of the biggest bombs in the format, Defiler of Vigor, with a ton of green permanents to potentially put counters on our whole board. So that's our biggest win condition, this Defiler of Vigor here. So hopefully that works out for us. But we have alternate win conditions. Big old Mossbeard Ancient, some giant Tolarian Terrors, and we have a Karn. If we can get into board state where it's hard for our opponent to attack in, Karn can take over the game as well. Karn does it a little slowly, but as soon as you hit that ultimate, you're definitely going to win the game. Or if you can just sit there drawing extra cards each turn, if you have a bunch of extra mana, if you're flooded out and you top deck Karn, then you could just immediately just minus Karn like 4 times in a row to tutor for the best cards out of your deck, basically. Dig like 5 or 6 cards deep 4 turns in a row. So we'll see about Karn. I think Karn playing 100% competitively is probably a cut in this deck, but I've never played with Karn before, and it's not actually completely unplayable, so I'm going to play around with it this time around. Again, the biggest flaw with Karn, it's not good when you're on the defensive, but if the board states are even, Karn can do a ton of work. So we'll see what happens, see how much value we can accrue in the Simic value pile. And without further ado, let's head into game one. All right, here we are in game one, question mark. Nobody has drawn a hand. Been here 10, 20 seconds now. Seems like an arena glitch of some kind. Oh, I've never noticed that before. Very fancy. Oh, there we go. All right, and it just took a little bit here. We're there. We're in it. This is keepable. It's not super exciting. We don't have great early game action, but Deathbloom Gardener helping get to the Ancient's pretty exciting. And Badger is a solid-sized creature to get blocking early. And there we go. That was a great draw. Drawing into Sunbathing Rubala here. Now the hand looks pretty great. Splatter Goblin from our opponent. That can trade up into a 3/3 thanks to the -1/-1. So I may just block with a Root Walla here. 4 mana for +3/+3. Not the most impressive Root Walla ever in our deck. And we don't even have the Swamp yet anyway, so our Root Walla is mainly in here as a 2-drop to trade aggressively. Uh-oh. Oh my god. Our opponent can recast a creature from their graveyard every turn just by tapping this. Oh, it loses all other types. Oh, so it's not an artifact creature, it's just an artifact, period? Interesting. Okay, that's not that bad. That's not that bad then. Because it loses all other types, there's just no point in doing that here. But if they get some creatures with good abilities, that's going to be nasty. So we played our Gardener, so we knew we'd have 4 mana this turn to play just a big beefy creature and start smashing in. Start slapping as much as we can now. Cut down the Gardener makes a lot of sense. They saw that I missed a land drop here. So definitely a solid play. Our opponent has missed a couple land drops, and now we have as well. We are neither player doing great on mana here, but luckily I've got 1 more land than my opponent. And the Mana Dork helped me get a 4/4 out on this board, so our board is far larger than our opponent's, just by being a green deck with 1 more mana. And there they go, they've hit their second color, they've hit their 3rd land, so now we're in for it. Tolarian Geyser on the Magnagoth Sentry when I don't have the 4th land, seems pretty good. Let's just top deck it and everything will be fine. See? I told you. It's all gonna be okay. Send in with the Bog Badger. I really like the artwork on Rezug. That's very fun. I'm very interested to see. I don't know if we'll get to see because our opponent has started this game so stuck on mana here. This game might end quickly. But I am very interested to see if they have any really good synergies with that. Ooh, Phyrexian Rager is one. Right there. It's not a great one when they're as choked on mana as they are, because if they spend the turn recasting a Rager, yeah, they're going to draw a card, lose a life, but they still have to spend 3 mana, so they won't be able to add anything else to the board. It's not going to be quite worth it. It's not going to be excellent. I don't have a black source, which means Bog Badger can't attack in well unless I draw 1. I guess I have Shore Up at least. No creatures to play here anyway, so I think I Impulse and see if I hit a black source, then I have more options of how I want to try to win the combat. Vidalian Tidemage is cool, but I need lands badly, and the black source is great, so we'll take that. Now we have Urborg and Shore Up, we can definitely get the attack in. Because now if they double block Bog Badger to kill it, I get to kill both their creatures instead of just 1 by casting Shore Up. So that feels really good, and I still have a Tribute to Urborg to use on one of their blockers during their turn, and then I'll have Terra Sunder once I untap. So yeah, I have the mana to tribute one of their blockers, Shore Up if they try to use a removal spell on one of my creatures, and then when I untap Terra Sunder another blocker, try to find lethal there. Seems pretty likely to happen. So Rezug would be a really fun commander to build around, but it is mono-colored. But I'm sure there's a lot of creatures that you could do some fancy stuff with. If you put them on the board as just an artifact, just a non-creature artifact. See if they have their own shore up here. Do they have their own shore up? Ooh, extinguish the light. Alright, well, our shore up's gonna be beautiful. Yep, shore up just really nasty there. It's gonna cost them the game. I mean, mostly their mana issues cost them the game, but shore up makes sure we're still hitting them for lethal that turn. They technically weren't dead on board yet, but it looked like they did not have a shore up of their own to save their creature, which means we'd untap and then cast our other removal spell, exile the Rezug, and get in for lethal. So that is going to be game 1 in the bag. See how it does as we head into round 2. Here we are in round 2. I do have double Tribute to Urborg, but I have to hit a land to cast any creatures, and I don't have my secondary color of the deck. I don't have any blue source. I do like double Tribute to Urborg in a hand with Tolarian Terror to get that to be cheaper, but I think there's just a little too much risk here not having a blue source and not guaranteed being able to cast anything here really except the tributes. I'm going to take the mulligan. I'm not a huge fan of it. This hand is arguably worse, but we've got the Defiler of Vigor, and I think that's what we're doing. We're trying to Gardener into Vigor here so we get rid of Karn. I don't think we're going to have enough creatures to really defend ourselves incredibly well to protect Karn. So let's just try to slam down a Defiler early and see if we can get a victory off of that. Alright, we drew a black card and a blue card on the mono-green hand, but we have a Deathbloom Gardener if they don't kill it. If they do, we're pretty much dead. But this hand was definitely not worth a mull to 5. So many draws make this hand incredibly active. And if my opponent doesn't have interaction, then literally any land gives me Defiler turn 4, which is like unstoppable. Well, we drew a land here. Unfortunately, it is an additional green source. Our opponent's on Jund, so it's highly unlikely that they don't have removal to kill Defiler. It's still kind of our only play. It's not like we've got a shore up in hand to wait till we have 6 mana to hold up. If I had a shore up in hand here, I'd wait to play Defiler till turn 6, but they're not going to spend a removal spell on a Badger, so we have nothing to try to bait removal before we drop Defiler. We're getting hit really hard here. Weatherseed Treaty is on +4/+4. Sunbathing Root Walla can get +4/+4 as well. Opponent can just try to outrace us and do it pretty well. Yeah, this is really bad for us. We might just die because of the speed of the hand. Yeah, we're at 4. Probably just dead. We are dead to Amiria's Outriders, although I can hold up Essence Scatter, which I think is the play. I want to hold up Essence Scatter and Tribute to Urborg, but the only way to do that is if I want to cast Bog Badger and do that, I have to pay 2 life on the Badger, which seems horrible. Root Wall is a 5/5 maximum. No, it's +4/+4. It's a 6/6. I guess I block it with Gardener. But I can't kill the Knight with Tribute because they just give it +1/+1 unless I kick it. And if I kick it, 4/5/6, I guess I can still hold up an Essence Scatter. Actually, even if there's no instance or sources to kick it. Yikes, yikes, yikes. Yeah, if I tribute Root Walla, then I scatter Miria's Outrider and double block Knight. But if I tribute Root Walla, I have to tap the Deathbloom Gardener, so I can't double block Knight, so I just die to the Knight. Do I have to pay the 2 life for Badger here so that I can play Badger, Tribute, and... I genuinely think that's the only option, is to play Badger, Tribute, and Scatter, which means I pay 2 life and go to 2. Wait, let me pay for Exium, please. Oh, there. Okay. This is not ideal. All right. Oh, we're just gonna get bodied by a trick here. No, no trick, okay. Writhing Necromass. I have to hold this scatter for Miria's Outriders and just block that with a 2/2 Death Touch. Which means I don't have a black source anymore. Oh, yikes. Yeah, Urborg Repossession's a pretty busted card. Now I have to just counter the menace or die to a menace creature. It's all lands. We're not dead yet. Alright, I'll play another turn, but we're pretty much dead. I guess if I draw that Jin, the flyer, the Alchemy flyer, that's a shot. Thank you, Arena. Very cool. 1 and 1 it'll be. Alright. Another hand with some mana issues, but Impulse digs 4 cards deep for the green source, so even if we don't hit it off of Impulse, we'll then be 33, plus my draw next turn, 32, 20. We'll be 12 cards deep into our library, so unless there's no green source, 12 cards deep. Impulse will be getting us there. We immediately got the green source. It's pretty nice. Pretty nice. Salvaged Mana Worker, alright. Opponent has excellent mana. Unless I cut that down, but that doesn't seem worth it. Ooh, Skyrider Djinn's really cool. We are not going to be playing that for a little bit. I guess I probably should have took a land if there was one, because of how high mana cost my hand is. But yeah, Skyrider Djinn, we're going to play that last, so that we actually draw cards off of it. We're going to play all these sentries first. Probably sentries into the Terror. Cut down the Mana Dork here, I think. Makes Terror cheaper, which is important. And get my own Mana Dork. That does get me there to all the Magnagoth sentries. Phyrexian Rager. Opponent draws a card. Tangled Islet. This is definitely a bad trade for me. Come on out, Sentry. Now we got blockers for days. Bind Soul Spider. So our opponent is going to mill all their lands out of deck slowly but surely. Make sure they don't flood out, which is pretty nice. Vanquisher's Axe. Actually pretty bad for me here, because now all these little creatures get to start trading up into my sentries. It's far from ideal. I think I'm taking the trade yet. Root Wall. I can play a Root Wall and hold up a tribute to Urborg. Then I have a better creature to trade into a Rager because it's just smaller. Send Sentry in, I get to kill both creatures if they go for the block. Life totals are relatively even. I'm going to kill 2 of their attackers this turn. They don't use any tricks, I'll just take the 4. Just gonna hold up the tribute in case they used a trick during the combat to try to win that fight. Weatherseed Treaty. Okay, get a basic land. The trample part's gonna be pretty bad for me. That is gonna be really nasty. But I mean, at least they're down to a 1/3 and a 1/1 now. We've got the 5 mana for Terror, but now it's only 4 anyway. Yeah, probably play a Ward Blocker. Oh, no scatter here. No scatter. Life totals are pretty much even again. There's an Iconoclast with haste, 4 power, throw an axe on it, it's a 6. It'll be 5 power every other turn still. Might just trade Terror into that. Our opponent's down to 1 card in hand, and they're going to be giving something +6/+6 next turn. Yeah, let's just stop all this damage. Kill that thing. They're going to give something +6/+6 trample next turn. Is this a bite down? Oh, maybe another Urborg repossession. Oh, I'm so tired of Urborg repossession. So good. Alright, Magnagloss Sentry, come on down. And now we have to hold off, because this is the turn where they're going to hit us for 1,000,000. We get 1 more land here, and the Mossbeard Ancient really gets us back in the game here. Astor, Bearer of Blades. Well, that definitely explains the Vanquisher's Axe. Not a card you see particularly often, especially not in Domain, but when you've got Astor to get some value picking up equipment, there you go. Now they all equip for only 1 mana, and they've got 2 of them. Astor has haste unequipped. Oh, just because Hero's Heirloom specifically, not Astor's ability. Yeah, that's devastating. That's 14 trampling damage. I have 9 toughness. 14 minus 9, I take like 5 here. Take 7 right there. I'd be taking 8 and going to 1. And then I wouldn't have the mana to play Mossbeard Ancient. They were probably just dead. Astor into Hero's Blade was devastating. Being to immediately have an 8/5 haste because they got the Hero's Heirloom. It's a very good draw. Any way to survive without blocking with Deathbloom Gardener? I'm gonna take 7 from these 2. Lose both sentries. Probably our best bet. We have to hit a land off the top, though. Every land in our deck is an untapped land, though. Sure, I'll go to 2 life and need to top deck a land. If I do top deck a land, though, I'm not in the lead, but things are back to even. Alright, well, we're dead. I'll play a Djinn as a blocker and I contribute 1 thing. I can have a 4/3 trample. I'm pretty sure I'm just dead. This Djinn draws me 1 card. It's not terrible. I mean, it's just sorcery speed. That is pretty bad. Sorcery speed impulse, but worse. Yeah. Sorcery speed, worse version of impulse. Is there any way... I guess I need all my blockers anyway, so I can't really kill it before the +1/+1 resolves. If I do, I'm 1 less blocker. Although they don't have any other haste creatures, because Heirloom only gives haste to... Oh, they can just equip the 2 different creatures, though, if I play or tribute right now. Right, equip an axe there, equip an Heirloom there, and either creature's lethal. Yeah, I can't tribute now, or they have a 100% clear path to victory. I need to hide the information, so there's a chance that they go for a line where a tribute can stop the lethal. If they just equip everything, then I can block Mana Worker with my Death Toucher, Iconoclast with my Djinn, and tribute the Saproling, and live another turn, killing 2 of their attackers. But then I don't have a way to cast Mossbeard Ancient if I hit a land, which means I don't really have an out to victory next turn. but that would keep me alive. I think I can survive this as well. I could go to 1 life now. Kill the scarier creatures this way, at least. To lose my Djinn. With this trample, this is the way I have to block. I have to block all the trample. So I have to lose the Djinn. They're down to a 1/1, but they got plenty of equipment for it. All my black cards cost a single black. I don't have any double blues, so we go blue, black, see the truth. Scatter Terror. This Saproling's a 5/1, which means if I play Terror, it just trades, which is quite bad, but it's my only option to not die. Because in Essence Scatter, I just die. They don't even have to equip the Saproling to kill me. The equipment really putting in work here. Just making all these small creatures trade up into my chunky blockers. Alright, there's the Phyrexian Rager. The Mossbeard mana. They can only make that Rager a 6/3, so they can't make the Rager big enough to hit Ancient. If we top deck like an absolute champion... Oh. Nope, we're dead. Opponent has the removal for the 7/7, so they can double equip Rager, or they can even give Urtai haste for style points. And added rudeness. 1 and 2 it is. If our opponent drew dead those last couple turns there, the fact that Wandering Treefolk was on top for us would have been huge. But Urtai is far from drawing dead. Alright, here we are now in game 4. The mana base definitely been harming us a lot, but we've got Impulse again, which is very, very helpful. I do have Mana Worker here. I'd actually probably rather Mana Worker into Gardener now that I know I have a 3rd land, so I know I can Gardener turn 3. And I can potentially drop a turn 4 Karn with 2 creatures on board before my opponent has any. No creatures? No creatures! Not a lot of people running main deck Negate, mostly main deck Essence Scatters, so I think I drop a Karn and just start doing it. Just start Karning all day long.
It warms my
Yeah. If opponent can't put the pressure on me, can't get into this Karn, that ult's gonna win the game. Because you get to make these Power Stones do damage to any target, so they can shred creatures off the board, or just dome your opponent for multiple damage each turn. You also get to use the Salvage Mana Worker, because that is an artifact. And we're definitely just going to keep plussing here, because this is one of the games where we still have things to cast, so we're just going to keep plussing while we spend all of our mana on other stuff. If you draw Karn super late game, oftentimes the idea is you slam down Karn and then just minus it, because you have the mana to dump into the minus ability. But since we don't here, we have plenty to do with our mana still, I'm just going to use the plus and aim for the ultimate. Cult Conscript if one of their creatures dies. I'm still going to hold up this Deathbloom Gardener here. Let's send in Mana Worker, play a Sentry. And I've got a Gardener as a blocker, plus the ability from the Gardener to cast this Impulse. They do have the scatters. That probably felt real bad having scatter and seeing a Karn land. Unless they just drew it off Shadow Prophecy, but just as likely they just had it in the opener. And they just see me tap out turn 4. They're like, oh yeah, this is going to be a great scatter. And then Karn goes on the stack. It's like, well. Could have Extinguish the Light here. That would not be fun for me. Rona's Vortex. That does work as well. Puts Karn on the bottom. Yep. They've just got the removal for the Karn. Tide Mage is incredible here. Straight up incredible here. And one cool combo with Karn is that I can use this mana to get a mana out of the Mana Worker. So I actually get to use these Power Stones to cast non-artifact spells. Because I have a Mana Worker on board, which is just hilarious. Pretty cool. Just gonna keep making more Death Touchers, I guess. Although if I made another Mana Worker, that would make the other Power Stone usable for mana, because I can run it through the Mana Worker again. Attribute my value play. There's a Tolarian Terror though, pretty big one. Pretty good one. And Tolarian Terror of their own, not ideal. Not ideal. Tribute to Urborg, we got 1 engrave. That's not going to do it, but we could try to win in combat with it. I don't think I'd try to do that unless they use a trick. This is still fine for me. And if I tried to use that in combat and then they responded with Shore Up, that would just be completely devastating. Just be like a straight guaranteed way to lose the game. Alright. Pretty nasty here. Badgers coming out. They've got the mana for the stupid conscript again. That's so frustrating. I have a conscript. Oh my god, they can just sack the 1/1 instead. We still kill one of their creatures here, and they can't get the conscript though, because they won't have the mana up for conscript after this. It's not good, but it's not anywhere near as bad as it could have been. It's actually fine. And we have a Terra Sunder. That makes it really bad. If we were going to draw into Terra Sunder, then yeah, we basically just wasted tribute. If we could just exile the horse the next turn anyway. Yep. Wasting the tribute might have cost us the game here. I still, even though it didn't pan out for us, I think with no information there, oh great. I think with no information, the Tolarian Terror versus Tolarian Terror combat against an opponent who has like 5 cards in hand at the time, I don't think I'm supposed to try to tribute to save my terror against their terror, because I just don't know what's in their hand, and it's so easy for their hand, because they had 4 mana up, to have been their own tribute, or a shore up. Particularly a shore up would have been absolutely devastating. So I'm fine with how I played that one, but yeah, the tribute to Urborg on the horse when they could just sack a creature and save it was rough. that maybe we would have found the win had I still had a tribute here. We would have at least killed the Shieldred now, because now I'd have 1, 2, 3, so it would be -5/-5. So that was kind of rough. Definitely could have found some better lines today. Biggest mistakes of the day, some gameplay errors, and I should have taken my dual lands more highly. I'm just kind of tired of the format. I wanted to stop playing 3-color plus value soup, but that's kind of just what you do in Dominaria. So I think just a little rusty, playing a little poorly and drafting a little poorly because of just boredom with the format in general, just playing too much of the format lately. Where, yeah, this is a format, you just scoop up the duels. Just scoop up duels and then scoop up the best cards. We did not scoop up duels, so we had some mana issues, and I definitely played some games pretty poorly. If I played perfectly today, this deck might have been like a 3-3 or something, which is, I think, a fair place to put it. Because the lack of good mana fixing is pretty rough. Karn was pretty bad, so, but we talked about that when I built the deck. I'm not playing Karn strictly out of a competitive sense. I just kind of wanted to play Karn the first time ever. See if we could get anything done with Karn. We definitely couldn't. All in all, I think the deck's pretty mediocre. Mediocre doesn't mean bad. It's just very milk water, very average, very lukewarm. So still a pretty bad run for this deck, I think. I think this deck's like a 3-3 on average. Not a great deck, not a great run today. But not a horrible one. We've got a lot going for the deck. We have huge bombs, Defiler, Skyrider, Jhin, Vidalian, Tide Mage. We've got good removal, Tear Sunder, Tributes, and Cut Down. Just played a little loose, drafted a little loose, needed some better mana fixing to make the deck perfect. If I strictly wanted to win, running the deck without the Karn would have played better. The one time we actually got to play Karn, it just got bounced before it actually did anything. So, would have been better if it was almost any other card there. So, yeah. Sad draft, but you definitely can't win them all. And the first pretty bad draft in some time, so we were definitely due for a poor run. I think we also got in some pretty rough matchups. A lot of the deck idea here and the power in the deck is trying to outsize our opponent's creatures so that our creatures get to trade into like 2 of their cards. So that one matchup where our opponent just had all the equipment so they can just make their 1/1s 5/1s, which then start trading into sentries and terrors and stuff. That was a really, really poor matchup for us because now all of a sudden their 2-mana cards are just trading up into our really big creatures, which is far from ideal for us. That was really, really rough there. So I think that was the worst matchup for us. That was nasty stuff, that game. And then there was that one game we drew a lot of lands and just got aggroed out a bit hard. And then the final game was just a lot of loose plays adding up in the end against an opponent with a very good deck. Got a lot of multiple 2-for-1s on us with like choking my asthma and stuff like that. So that was pretty nasty. So not a great draft today, but you win some, you do lose some eventually. We'll claim our prize here, get our 100 gems in our 1 pack. That is not going to end the Dominaria United Alchemy drafts, but that is going to end the video for today. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to let the YouTube algorithm know to send you some more. I will be playing 2 more Dominaria United Alchemy drafts tomorrow and the day after, most likely, unless there's some other event going on those 2 days that I'm forgetting about. And then this Thursday, we have Streets of New Capenna rebalanced drafts, so we'll be hopping into that and seeing what's going on there. So should be interesting to see if they actually made it so 3 colors is super viable. It doesn't look like the changes are that dramatic, but we'll find out soon. We'll be back in Streets of New Capenna seeing what's going on in that format. So that is going to end today's video. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for some more Magic Arena.